Honorable Speaker of Parliament, Honorable Prime Minister, Honorable Cabinet Ministers and Assistant Ministers, Honorable Leader of Opposition, Honorable Members of Parliament, ladies and gentlemen, Ms. Ayanda Vinaka.
Greetings to you all.
Honorable Speaker, I rise to deliver my statement on the progress of the emission reduction program in Fiji. The Ministry of Forestry has been actively and tirelessly advocating and promoting the sustainable forest management concept since the early 1990s, but have been continuously challenged by the increasing need for land for agricultural development, infrastructure and settlement, which are the main drivers for forest clearing. A key barrier to the adoption of sustainable forest management has been our inability to provide an income stream to landowners as an alternative to natural forest extraction and other land-based developments. Honorable Speaker, with the emission reduction program, we now have the ability to provide an alternative income stream through the monetizing of established carbon stocks as an incentive for adopting good husbandry practices, and is also expected to bring about the changes in the adoption of more contemporary approaches and innovations, but more importantly, the positive change in human behavior towards the environment and the use of the forest and land resources. Honorable Speaker, in January of 2021, the Fiji government, on behalf of the people of Fiji, signed an emission reduction payment agreement contract with the Forest Carbon Partnership Facility, FCPF, which is managed by the World Bank, covering Viti Levu, Vanuatu, and Taveuni. Under the contract, Fiji is to establish 37,282 hectares of forest capable of sequestering 2.5 million tons of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases. Honorable Speaker, in return, FCPF will make result-based payments amounting to a total of 12.5 million US dollars, which is equivalent to 25 million Fiji dollars, based on an agreement term from July 2019 to December 2024 on the following reporting and verification period. From July 11th, 2019 to 31st December 2020, 300,000 emission reduction units. From January 1st, 2021 to 31st December 2022, 1 million emission reduction units. From January 1st, 2023 to 31st December 2024, 1.2 million emission reduction units. As we speak, Honorable Speaker, the development of a national framework for monitoring, reporting to support the verification of the net level of greenhouse gas emission from within the forest and land-based sectors has been completed. And the assessment of net emissions for the period beginning from 11th July 2019 to 31st December 2020 has been conducted, and the monitoring report has been audited by an independent third party. Honorable Speaker, the report records a net reduction in greenhouse gas emission of 922,828 tons of carbon dioxide equivalent, and is an aggregate of the emission reduction units generated by the monitored program and activities that caused the change in forest cover, which are: 1, the reduction in rate of deforestation by 82%. That is the total removal of natural forests and the conversion of the area to other forms of land use, example, agriculture, road infrastructure, and establishment of new settlement areas, to name a few. This reduction generated 493,887 emission reduction units. 2, the reduction in rate of forest degradation by 16%. These are activities extractive or destructive in nature that affect the integrity, structure, and health of the natural forests and lead to the removal of destruction of wood fiber, example, logging operations for timber production, and forest fires in pine plantations, which are the two main activities monitored. This reduction generated 115,583 emission reduction units. 3, The noted improvement in the management of the operations of the government-owned forest-based companies, that is the Fiji Pine Limited and the Fiji Hardwood Corporation Limited. On aggregate, both companies retained more forest plantation area than what was harvested for timber production purposes, generating a total of 293,618 emission reduction units. 4, the contributions and impact of the reforestation and afforestation work to rehabilitate degraded areas through the community-based tree planting program under the Ministry's Rehabilitation of Degraded Forest Program and the global pledge of 13 million trees in 15 years. Between 2019 and 2020, an area of 2,224.96 hectares was replanted, which generated 19,739 emission reduction units. Honorable Speaker, under the Emission Reduction Payment Agreement with the Carbon Fund for the Forest Carbon Partnership Facility, which is the current carbon trade agreement endorsed by the government, the 922,828 emission reduction units recorded for the first monitoring period account for 37% of the total contract volume of 2.5 million emission reduction units. The total recorded 922,828 emission reduction units will be transferred and traded to the Carbon Fund, which will first require the securing of leases over forest areas that have contributed to the recorded emission reduction units. The work to secure these areas, Honorable Speaker, under leases will begin by May 2025, when the beneficiary registry will be finalized. The preliminary figures indicate that there is an estimated 8,000 land units anticipated to be involved in the process. Honorable Speaker, the transfer and trade of the 922,828 emission reduction units will unlock total payment of $4.6 million US, which is equivalent to 10.2 Fiji dollars. Under the approved benefit sharing mechanism, Honorable Speaker, the beneficiaries will receive 80%, which is 3.7 US dollars, 3.7 million US dollars, an equivalent of 8.2 million Fiji dollars. The remaining 20% or US dollars, the remaining 20% of the 922,828 US dollars will be retained by the Fiji government. That is 5% as a buffer fund and 50% as its administration cost. Honorable Speaker, the final monitoring report, which covers the assessment period from January 2021 to December 2024, will be submitted for auditing by October 2025. This final report will record how well the activities and operations within the forest and land-based sectors have been managed towards achieving the remaining 1.6 million emission reduction units. Honorable Speaker, the Climate Change Act of 2021, in particular Part 10, was to provide the legal provisions for the transfer and trade of the emission reduction units. However, given its current status, an alternative pathway for the transfer and trade has been proposed, which is now before the government lawyers. This process has been delayed and is now expected to be finalized by late April to early May of this year. In brief, Honorable Speaker, the pathway proposes the use of the land lease agreement arrangement as the legal document to register and transfer the emission reduction units. The terms of the Emission Reduction Partnership Agreement and the Forest Carbon Facility Carbon Fund will end on the 31st of December 2025. If all domestic processes are completed as scheduled, then the following transfer and trade of the emission reduction units will happen. By June to July of this year, a total of 323,161 emission reduction units should be traded, which accounts for 35% of the total emission reduction units recorded for the first monitoring period, which amounts to 1.6 million US dollars, an equivalent of 3.6 Fiji dollars. The units traded are for Fiji Pine Limited, 131,668 emission reduction units. Fiji Hardwood Corporation Limited, 161,950 emission reduction units. And under the Director of Lands, State Schedule A and B, which is 29,543 emission reduction units. Honorable Speaker, by December of 2025, a total of 135,322 emission reduction units should be traded, amounting to payment of 676,610 US dollars, an equivalent of 1.5 million Fiji dollars. The units traded are for one, the sustainable management of natural forests, which will cover 115,583 emission reduction units. Two, community tree planting, which will cover 19,739 emission reduction units. Honorable Speaker, by the end of December, the total number of emission reduction units expected to be traded is 458,483 units, which accounts for 49.7% of the total emission reduction units recorded for the first monitoring period, amounting to a total of 2.3 million US dollars, equivalent to 5.0 Fiji dollars. Honorable Speaker, by the end of December, the auditing for the second and final monitoring report for the period 1st January 2021 to 31st December 2024 would have been completed, and the emission reduction units generated for this period would have been known. It is most likely that the list of beneficiaries registered for the first period would also qualify to receive payment for the final period unless there is a significant reduction in the forest carbon stock initially registered. Honorable Speaker, it should also be noted that there is a possibility of a further extension to the term of the FCPF carbon fund, but this is only applicable to countries that have shown significant and consolidated progress in the securing of lease titles and its subsequent transfer to the carbon fund. The process is dependent on how efficiently the leasing process is implemented and completed. Honorable Speaker, the emission reduction program is best suited for a small island developing state like Fiji for the following reasons. One, for the first part, Fiji has all the hallmarks for establishing a forest carbon trading platform to support the nation's development programs, and these are the net emission levels from its forest and land-based sectors are insignificant compared to global trends. Fiji is blessed with a sound forest carbon stock resource base from which its natural tropical forest and pine and mahogany plantation, which capably meets our timber needs. There are also existing national framework for governing the forest and land resources, which includes the national registration system that document ownership and land titles. For the second part, Fiji is provided the unique opportunity to learn firsthand about the forest carbon trade business and to test the robustness of our national program framework in terms of its accuracy, consistency, and the level of compliance under a third-party auditing process to verify and validate the following conditions. One, on social safeguards, that the welfare, equity, rights, aspirations, and intellectual properties of the indigenous people, the resource owners, and other forest-dwelling communities are protected and safeguarded, and that all grievances and issues are reported or redressed. Two, environmental safeguards, that the natural landscape approach is promoted for the development and management of the forest and land resources, whilst forging towards the achievement of sustainable development goals, low emission development strategy goals, at net zero by 2050 goal. Three, at sectorial level, all policy and legal frameworks and arrangements governing forest and land resources are adhered and followed, and that all good husbandry practices are promoted, implemented, and documented. Honorable Speaker, at this juncture, it is worth mentioning that Fiji is one of the 15 countries that have taken the bold step to record, report, and publicize its national net emission over the last 5 years under the FCPF framework. In doing so, Fiji's forest and the forest sector will enter into an era of unprecedented attention in terms of investment and sustainable financing, bilateral arrangements and market opportunities, and the rippling high tide effect of other sectors, example, tourism. Thirdly, Honorable Speaker, the forest-based carbon trade arrangement is designed to incentivize government to implement programs that ensure the reduction in the rate of deforestation and degradation and sustain the remaining natural tropical forest as forest carbon sinks. While the nuance is to promote the establishment of alternative forest plantation sources for timber needs, of which Fiji has made significant advancement in this area, with the timber industry and trade market based primarily on the performances of tropic pine and the Fiji mahogany as the leading contributors to the sector's GDP. Honorable Speaker, it should be mentioned that timber production sourced from the natural forest will continue, but this will be done through a sustainable approach, which involves the reduction of removable volume per area and the immediate replanting of harvested areas, and both of these regimes will be conditions instituted through the harvesting licenses issued. Honorable Speaker, in the 2025-2026 financial year, the Fiji Pine Limited and the Fiji Hardwood Corporation Limited will receive further funding support under the Reforestation of Degraded Forest Program. This move is expected to bring about positive changes that will lead to improved performances and results compared to the past practices, in which quality was often compromised for quantity for the following reasons. One, a greater number of trees and an area can be planted in a year, and the achievement of a 30 million trees in 15 years pledge can be achieved earlier than planned, and in doing so, safeguards and secures Fiji's timber source. Two, an improvement in achievements in terms of survival, area coverage, and forest vigor are assured under a plantation program that has been tested and proven. Three, the increase in area planted each year addresses the core sequestration objective of the emission reduction program in terms of maintaining and enhancing carbon sinks. Four, it should be noted that community-based tree planting programs will continue to be supported, but at a reduced scale, focused on the more modest and localized needs, example, the food and food security, fuel, wood, and energy needs, protection of water catchment and riparian systems. Any inspiration for establishing community-based woodlots for timber production needs will be channeled through the scheme framework and will be supported under the government grants provided to the Fiji Pine Trust and the Fiji Mahogany Trust. Honorable Speaker, it is worth mentioning that the review of the Mahogany Industry Development Act of 2020 is also very timely, as it will hopefully allow the mahogany industry to return in totality to the forest sector and to a governance and management framework that ensures its growth and expansion in terms of development, including the resource owners and contribution to nation building. Honorable Speaker, the emission reduction program has the potential to support the national carrier, Fiji Airways, under the carbon offsetting and reduction scheme for international aviation. The COSHIA units are recognized as the gold standard units that attract premium carbon prices, and so work is currently being conducted to meet these standards. Honorable Speaker, the carbon results-based payment provides an alternative and sustainable financing and income source for village communities to support their development programs and priorities. The Ministry is working with the Ministry of Itauki Affairs, provincial officers, the provincial administrators, the Itauki Land Trust Board, and the Ministry of Lands in this regard. Honorable Speaker, the emission reduction program provides information and improves our knowledge about our natural forests, trees, wildlife, and the importance of its ecological services and products. The Ministry will develop an education curriculum that will suit all levels of training, including primary school level. Honorable Speaker, I thank you for the opportunity to speak. Vinakasaka.